Hello, everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are looking at something that honestly sounds like a complete joke, but it actually turned into one of the most fascinating social and economic events of 2026. I mean, how exactly did a bizarre internet meme called the Cockroach Janta Party accidentally expose India's deepest macroeconomic anxieties? Well, we are going to unpack exactly how a sarcastic digital rebellion led by frustrated youth triggered a very real, very serious government crackdown. And we'll look at what the hard economic data tells us about why this movement resonated so deeply. Here's a quick roadmap of where we're heading today. First, how the phenomenon began. Second, we'll peek inside their crazy manifesto. Third, how the government struck back. Fourth, the real economic crisis fueling it all. And finally, the future of these digital protests. Let's dive in. All right, part one, the cockroach phenomenon begins. Let's look at how this ignited almost overnight. The sheer speed of this whole thing is just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. In merely 6 days in May 2026, we go from a completely random court hearing to a literal national security issue. On May 15th, a controversial remark drops in the Supreme Court. Literally the very next day, the Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP, launches its website. By May 18th, thousands are hanging out in an online meeting they playfully called Rochek Satsang, which is a pun on the word cockroach. And by May 21st, boom, the government steps in and suspends their accounts. 6 days. That is all it took. But what actually set this off? It all started with this quote. During a hearing about fake legal degrees, the Chief Justice of India was quoted using the words cockroaches and parasites. Now, to be fair, the Chief Justice quickly clarified that he was misquoted by the media. He was specifically talking about fraudsters entering professions with fake degrees, right? Not the youth in general. But for an entire generation of unemployed, chronically online young people fighting tooth and nail for jobs, that clarification arrived way too late. They took the word cockroach, internalized it, and completely weaponized it. They essentially said, you know what? The system already treats us like pests, so we're just going to own the title. And this number right here perfectly illustrates the scale of that pent-up frustration. 15 million. That's 1.5 crore followers their social media gained in just 5 days. Just to put that into perspective for you, this meme-driven, totally satirical party vastly outpaced the social media followings of massive, established, real-world political parties in India almost overnight. It wasn't just a quirky internet trend, it was an absolute explosion of collective venting. Which brings us to our second section, inside the CJP Manifesto. If millions of people are rushing to join a political party named after a literal household pest, what exactly are they signing up for? This is where you see the absolute genius of the movement, which was actually created by a 30-year-old student named Abhijeet Dipke. The eligibility criteria to join were hilarious. Step 1, be unemployed. Step 2, embrace peak laziness. Step 3, be chronically online. Specifically, you had to rack up 11 or more hours of screen time a day. And Step 4, be a professional ranter. They took everything that society constantly shames Gen Z for and just turned it into a massive badge of honor. It was pure, unfiltered sarcasm. In fact, their official ideology was listed as secular, socialist, democratic, and lazy. But here's the real kicker. When you look closer, beneath those goofy, lazy membership rules, they had some remarkably sharp, anti-establishment political demands. Their official manifesto called for a total ban on post-retirement government appointments for chief justices, just to ensure absolute judicial independence. They asked for a true 50% reservation for women in the cabinet. They demanded the cancellation of media licenses for massive corporate houses like Ambani and Adani to guarantee fair reporting. And they wanted a harsh 20-year election ban for politicians who switch parties. So the whole thing was actually a Trojan horse. They were using comedy as a mask to ask the hardest political questions of the day. Let's move on to Section 3. The government strikes back. The joke was spreading incredibly fast, but as you'll see, the authorities were absolutely not laughing. It's really wild to compare these two competing perspectives. On one side, you have the CJP's stated intent, a sarcastic digital protest won by lazy youth just blowing off steam with some memes. But on the flip side, you have the Intelligence Bureau's assessment. The IB officially reported that the account was posting provocative content that actually posed a threat to national security. And based on that very serious intelligence report, the IT ministry invoked Section 69 of the Information Technology Act and suspended the movement's accounts. A joke party of self-proclaimed lazy trolls was suddenly being handled like a legitimate national security threat. However, the founders of the movement had a totally different theory for why they got banned. Abhijeet Dipke actually claimed the government's response was dictatorial. Why? Because of their raw power to mobilize people. Before getting shut down, the movement had gathered 10 lakh member signups, and even more importantly, 6 lakh signatures on a petition demanding the education minister's resignation. This was directly tied to the highly controversial NEET UG exam paper leak, an issue affecting millions of real students. So, according to the CJP, it wasn't the memes that got them banned. It was the fact that they were successfully organizing hundreds of thousands of angry students around a very real, very damaging educational crisis. And that perfectly tees up Section 4, the real economic crisis. Because why did this meme strike such a massive nerve? Well, the humor was built right on top of a very painful macroeconomic crisis. To really get this, we have to look at the analysis of renowned economist Surjit Bala. Surjit Bala paints an incredibly sobering picture of the exact economic environment these youths are dealing with. He points out that, politically, the BJP is winning elections but losing the economy. He notes that India's GDP, despite all these massive political victories, there's a real failure on economic management going on. He points out that while a narrative of being the fastest-growing major economy is pushed heavily, it's actually masking deep structural failures, a total lack of private investment, and severe employment anxieties. Let's actually look at the hard data Bala uses here. When you evaluate the metrics since 2014, the numbers tell a story that's pretty different from the official slogans. Sure, in standard GDP growth, India ranks 9th globally. In per capita GDP growth, it's 8th. But here is the critical metric you need to pay attention to. When you measure growth on a US dollar scale, India's growth rate is just 4.7%, which drops it all the way down to 16th in the world. To put that into perspective, on this same scale, countries like Bangladesh at 8.3% and Ethiopia at 7.2% are actually outpacing India by quite a bit. Bala's whole argument is that you can spin the numbers however you want, but the reality on the ground, the reality these unemployed kids are living, just doesn't match that fastest-growing tag. And the real-world consequences of that are stark. The Indian rupee has devalued by 12% against the dollar over just the last year alone. That marks the 7th consecutive year of decline. As Bala points out, think about it. If inflation is supposedly controlled and growth is supposedly stable, your currency should strengthen because foreign investors want to bring their money in. But instead, the rupee is plummeting. Why? Because foreign and domestic investors lack confidence in the policy environment. And here's the bottom line. When there's no investment, there's no job creation. This 12% drop isn't just some abstract finance number. It is literally the reason why highly educated young people are sitting at home for 11 hours a day, feeling so hopeless that they're calling themselves cockroaches. Which leads us straight into our final section, the future of digital protests. What does all of this actually tell us about the road ahead? Well, journalist Vivek Surendran theorized something really fascinating. He said what we are witnessing right now is irony as a survival mechanism. You see, in modern India, shame has become an incredibly powerful political emotion. The shame of being unemployed, the shame of having to move back in with your parents at 30, the shame of just not being settled. For this highly educated but deeply frustrated generation, the old school language of protest, marching in the streets, shouting slogans, it feels outdated to them. Instead, their language is memes. They're using humor and biting sarcasm to cope with massive systemic failures. So these memes, they aren't just jokes. They are literally emotional distress signals born out of deep collective anxiety. So I want to leave you with a question to think about today. Is the Cockroach Janta Party just a fleeting internet joke that we're all going to forget about by next month? Or is it the beginning of a brand new type of youth rebellion, one that skips the streets entirely, bypasses the traditional media, and holds the system accountable through the sheer power of collective laughter and digital disruption? The government's incredibly swift ban definitely suggests they believe it's a real threat. And hey, as the founders of the CJP pointed out themselves, cockroaches are famously hard to kill. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the narrative, and I'll catch you next time.